Welcome to Something Crunchy. Tyler is homies with Blake. Blake is the older bro of Blair. Blair is married to Tyler, and is a slutty slut.
Welcome to Something Crunchy.
What the hell is crunchy?
Welcome to Something Crunchy.
Welcome to another special edition episode of Something Crunchy. I'm Cullen Blake. With me as always, Blair and Tyler Dressel. We have an extremely crunchy guest on with us tonight. This man oozes crunch. He's an Emmy-winning writer and executive producer on The Simpsons and co-creator of F is for Family. Please welcome Michael Price.
Yeah!
Oh, thank you. Wow, such an ovation. That's wonderful.
Thank you for crunching down with us, Mr. Price. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Great. How were your holidays?
Oh, very good. Very quiet. We originally planned to go back east. I grew up in New Jersey, but I live in Los Angeles now. And as the Omicron started to snowball, we decided maybe not get on a plane. So we took it a very quiet time then over the holidays. But it was nice.
All right on.
Nice.
Do you feel good about 2022?
Boy, that's a good question.
It's a loaded one.
It changes every day, doesn't it?
It changes every day. It is a loaded question.
I mean, as far as, I feel like I think ultimately it's going to be better. Right now it doesn't look so hot. I have hopes that we'll all get through it and get through this crunch.
Well
this crunch.
said.
Speaking of crunchy, we're in the middle of crunch right now.
Well, it is a treat and an honor to have you on. Let's first discuss some of your life outside of your career. What are you doing when you're not writing bangers and working on projects with global-wide fame?
Well, I'm mostly walking my two dogs and hanging out with my wonderful wife, and I have a son who's he's in his 20s now. He's in college, so we don't see him as much as we used to, but we hang out, and he and I are both big baseball fans. I grew up in New Jersey, like I said. I'm a huge fan of the New York Mets. That's the only sport that I really care about is baseball and the New York Mets.
Right.
And so my son grew up in LA, where the Dodgers have been dominating for like the last dozen years, but he's a Mets fan. So
cool.
Hopefully he'll thank me later. He might not. I don't know. But
Staying true.
The Mets have a great
turned him into a
culture.
Mets fan.
The fans of the Mets are diehard Mets fans.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. I mean, we haven't won a World Series since 1986, which I remember. Been in it a couple of times since then, and they always seem to find some new and different way to screw it up.
They're heartbreakers, 100%. At least the one in '86 was extremely memorable.
Yeah.
Right. I got a great book. My wife gave me a great book for Christmas about them, just basically saying, like, even when they lose, they find an amazing way to lose. When they win, they find an amazing way to win. So it's never a dull moment.
All right. So you're from New Jersey, theater major at Montclair State College. So was Bruce Willis.
That's correct. I saw Bruce Willis in a play.
Really?
Yes. So here's my Bruce Willis story. When I was a freshman at Montclair State College, he was a senior, and they did a production of Tennessee Williams's Cat on the Hot Tin Roof.
Nice.
Wow.
That Bruce Willis was the star of. He played, if you're familiar with that play, the main character is called Brick, and that's the part that Paul Newman played in the movie. And he was in that play, and he was fine. I had heard later that he had gotten in a couple of scrapes with the director. Because even then he had kind of like the Bruce Willis attitude. This is what I heard. I didn't witness it firsthand, but I heard that he would often, in that play, they do a lot of drinking. So he's drinking like these like iced teas that are supposed to be whiskey or whatever. And he would just leave the set in the middle of the scene to go to the bathroom. So he wasn't supposed to be leaving the scene. That's what I had heard, that like the woman who's having the scene with him would be talking to him, and he just let her wander off and go pee into a coffee can or something and then come back, So that was the legend of Bruce Willis. So then years later, like a couple of years later, I hadn't thought of him. He would come around and like be at parties and stuff. And he was just kind of like this guy, like a little bit just kind of like the Matthew McConaughey guy in Days of Confused. So like even after he graduated, he was still hanging out with everybody, So and he was kind of a grungy guy, whatever. So a number of years later, I got a call from a friend of mine, and he's saying, "Hey, have you seen that show Moonlighting on TV?" I'm like, "Yes." I heard about it. He goes, have you seen? I saw one or two. He's like, you know that guy who's a star? Yeah, he's pretty good. He said, that's Bruce Willis.
Cool.
And I'm like, what? It was. So anyway, that's my Bruce Willis story.
He's like well known for wanting that special Bruce Willis treatment. It's funny to know that it was like rooted in the beginning.
It started early. Yeah.
Yeah. He gave 0 Fs, whatever, back then.
He is who he is, you know?
He says who he is. That's good. He's got a brand, and he established it back then in Montclair.
Oh, that's a great story. So after Montclair, went to graduate school at Tulane, degree in theater direction. Then, being a Second City and SNL fan, you started at Gotham City Improv. Between the collegiate education and the stage at Gotham City, which provided you with more of the skills that you applied in your writing career?
Oh, without a doubt, Gotham City. You know, I mean, I love theater. I still love the theater. I really enjoyed acting and directing in plays. But you know, I went to graduate school largely because I didn't know what to do once I got out of regular college. So I was like, oh, a chance to keep going to college for 3 more years. I'll do that. Which is what I did. And I had a great time there at Tulane. It was wonderful. I've still some amazing friends from there. And then after I got out from Tulane, I still didn't have no idea what to do with my life. And I continued doing theater back in New Jersey with some friends of mine from undergraduate school. And I was still knocking around, and I had every kind of crazy job you could picture. I was the worst. I was a teacher. My parents did the thing where when I told them I wanted to be a theater major, they were like, okay, well, as long as we're paying for you to go to college to be a theater major, we're going to insist that you also get like a marketable skill, whatever, which was for me, which was to like double major in theater and getting a teacher's degree. So, which is what I did. So then I did use it, but I taught in a town called Irvington, which is a suburb of Newark, New Jersey, which was, you know, you can't see me, but, you know, I'm like big, tall, white dude with glasses, you know, and this school was probably 75 to 80% African-American, you know, really cool kids, cool stuff going on. And I was completely like the whitest nerdy, like white guy. Like, you know, those bad comedians that do like white guys are like this and black guys are like this. I was the white guy like this, you know. So I didn't know what I was doing. I was in over my head. I was pretty young. I thought I would be like, it's so funny because we're recording this today when Sidney Poitier died earlier this morning, and he had a movie called Two Sir with Love. You ever see Two Sir with Love that he was in?
I have not.
It's a really great movie, but that was like, he was kind of the cool teacher in this London school full of juvenile delinquents, and he comes in and he's cool, and by the end of it they all love and respect him. So I thought I would be like the cool teacher coming in like fresh out of college and like, oh, these kids are gonna, yeah, but like within like, I want to say within a day or two, like I had no control over the classroom and I was just I was just done. So I was not a very good English teacher at Irvington High. I didn't know what I was doing. I was bad. So I did that. I did other things. I worked for a law firm as a proofreader at a law firm, and all kinds of crazy jobs. And then when I found out about improv training, I'd always loved Second City and Saturday Night Live and that style of comedy, but I never did it. And a friend of mine was in this group, and he said, take some classes with the group, and I did, and that's where everything got started from there.
Do most writers on your staff have a background in stand-up comedy?
No, not too many. If you look at the Simpsons staff, like the cliche they say is like everybody on the Simpsons is from the Harvard Lampoon, which it used to be more of that, like a little bit more of that back in the older days when everything started. But I still work for Al Jean and Mike Reese, who were members of the Harvard Lampoon, or one of the first kind of Harvard guys that came out. And there's still quite a few that come from that background. But not too many others either did stand up or did kind of like sketch comedy or improv that I did. People come from all different walks, but not too many that did stand up. For a while there, I got to work with one of the great comedians, Dana Gould, was on our staff for a number of years. So he's fantastic. And he was actually Oh, I'm sorry. I saw him live when I first came to L.A. The first time I came to LA with my old writing partner, we kind of came out of this was back in the early 90s, kind of like a scout out kind of mission. Like, do we really want to move to LA and see what it's like out there? And we came out for a couple of days and we went to the Improv and and Dana Gould was one of the comedians at the Improv that night. Anyway, he's great.
I get to work at the Improv in Tempe for about a year and a half. It was an awesome experience. Saw everybody under the sun.
Oh, I'm sure. Wow, that must have been really interesting and
incredible.
Fun.
He's got some stories from there. Well, you may have heard this once or twice before. We love The Simpsons, Mr. Bryce. It truly is the best show ever, my favorite show ever. There's nothing else I could say I've watched for 30 years, and I'm sure you never hear any of this. What are the most common Simpsons questions you get asked?
The one that is probably asked more than any is, do you write for one particular character, or does everybody write for every character?
Really?
They'll say they'll say like, oh, I'm a writer on Simpsons. Oh, really? Which character do you write for? Yes, people always ask that.
That's just like one
it's
writer
like,
per
no.
character.
Yeah, I'm the Krusty guy, or I'm the Marge guy.
Doesn't necessarily work that way, I wouldn't think. I would think it's more of a team effort for episodes and concepts.
It does not work that way. But I would say that is what we get asked almost more than. And then, I mean, I will also say this, that probably over the course of the last few years, what I get, and I imagine if I asked the other people, but they would probably agree with me, what we get more than ever now is like, how do you guys predict the
Predictions. Which
we don't. I mean, when you've been around that long, for 33 or 34 years, and you write 750 plus episodes.
There is definitely some coincidence there, like some strange coincidence there. But when you've done anything and been working on telling stories for 30 years and have over 600 episodes, yes, that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Lightning.
And I'll say this too, that the internet has messed things up a little bit sometimes, where there's some things that I've seen a couple things where like people have used trickery or whatever, Photoshop, to make something look like we did it, but we didn't. I've seen some of that, which maybe muddies it a little bit. And specifically with Trump becoming president, I wasn't around for that episode that was written, I think, like in 98 or 99. Yeah. But even at that time, as I recall, Donald Trump was talking about how he wanted to run for president. So it wasn't like too insane to think of like, oh, maybe 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then what happened is like they thought of the crazy absurd thing, and then I mean, it's not our fault that like reality got absurd.
Coincidence.
Yeah. Stranger than fiction. Because you came in like your first episode you worked on was the 300th, right? The Tony Hawk episode.
That was we were working on that the very first day I started.
Wow. What first a memorable episode too. I love that one.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a cool one to say you started on. And the 300th.
The very first thing I contributed to the show was that day where it was this thing, if you remember that episode, part of it involved that Bart had been in these commercials as a baby. For this stuff called baby stink breath.
Yes,
and and so they found an old VHS tape of like a TV show that Bart's commercial was on, and somebody was pitching that the show would be Perfect Strangers. And I don't know if it made it that way into the final episode or not, but it was going to be Perfect Strangers starring Bronson Pinchot. And so I remember pitching that. Bronson Pinchot's character Balky said, "Don't be ridiculous," and they were like, "What's that?" I was like, "That was his catchphrase." And they're like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, that's what it was." So that got into the script. I don't know if it made it into the final show or not, but that was the first thing that contributed that like sort of made it into the script.
Wow,
was saying, "Don't be ridiculous."
I could totally get why you would be asked about the predictions over and over. We're not going to do that here. What is the like strangest question you could think of that you've gotten on The Simpsons?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a strange one.
People get weird.
I mean, I remember once being at a Comic-Con, and it wasn't directed at me, but it was really funny because it was a Comic-Con panel that a bunch of us were on, and Matt Groening was there, of course, and someone got up in the audience, and they were kind of like they've done that on the show a number of times, like the kind of comic book guy type people in the audience at Comic-Con, and this guy said, "Whatever happened to this character?" It was called Old Uncle Pennybags or something. And Matt Groening literally said, I have no idea who that is.
Great question. What the hell are you talking about next?
Right, yeah. He's like, I don't know. You know more about the show than I do at this point.
Yeah.
So obviously writers are not assigned specific characters, but who is your favorite character to write for and why?
Well, I kind of mentioned him in passing a little bit ago, but I guess it might have to be Krusty the Clown.
Herschel, Schmoikel, Yurokam, Kristofsky?
Exactly.
Yes. That would be
I
one of
love
mine too.
Krusty. I grew up as a kid idolizing and kind of absorbing and inhaling all old kind of showbiz. So I grew up in the New York area in a pre-cable time when there were just about 5 different channels, and the network channels showed network stuff, but then the local channels showed all these old movies like the Marx Brothers, and they would show the Honeymooners and
Abbott and
all that old
Costello,
stuff.
Yeah.
Abbott and Costello, and I just loved all that stuff. I specifically loved anything old showbizy stuff, like the Steve Allen Show, anything with like old comedians and all that stuff. I loved it. So Krusty is kind of like all those people kind of rolled up into one.
Oh my
So
God, it makes so much
is.
sense you saying that.
It does make sense. He's one of my favorite characters too, because he's like the comic. He's the comedian, and he's kind of old Hollywood. Half our family's Jewish, so we get most of those references, and I appreciate him.
yeah. So it's a chance for me to throw out old references, and it's like I'm not just being an old guy now. I'm making a joke.
Yeah,
you know?
of course.
So if I have Krusty, when Krusty talks about like Arnold Stang or somebody, you know, it's like, all right, that's Krusty would do that, you know.
But for the
So
people that
it's
get
fun.
those
I love
references,
Krusty.
it's gold.
Yeah, there are people that
It's-
are getting all of those things.
Love that.
Yeah. So I have an episode coming up that'll be on later this season of The Simpsons. I think it'll be on probably maybe around March or so. That deals. The first part of it is a lot of it. It deals with sort of a backstory of how Krusty founded Krusty Burger and what his life was like and how Krusty Burger got started. So it's
Oh,
fun.
a background?
Nice.
Yes.
Always love backstories on the characters, and Krusty has had some good ones with his father, his upbringing,
Very complex.
the daughter, the estranged daughter that comes, or
Right.
not
Yeah,
estranged,
yeah.
surprised daughter. He didn't know about her.
Surprise daughter
Surprise
Sophie.
daughter.
That's right.
Yes, yeah, he's had some great storylines. So tell us about the writing retreat and give us a little peek behind this curtain. This is my dream job.
Yeah, well, as you all know, everyone in the world knows that we're in the middle of this pandemic right now, so we haven't had a chance to do one of those in a while. The last one I think we did probably was in December of 2019 or 2018. But that was the thing. Back in the old days before I got started there, I think they would actually literally go away somewhere. I think maybe they went to like Reno or something, or Vegas one time or something, actually went away and did like a writer's retreat. What it turned into in my time was that we would usually go to assemble in a big conference room at the Fox studio lot. And occasionally one time we did it, they rented out like a big room in a hotel down by the beach, which was nice. But that was a chance for us to then present our story ideas for the upcoming season. And it would usually be held around the beginning of December when we're planning the next season. And everyone had a chance to sort of put on a little bit of a show of you'd be working on your story idea and they go, okay, it's your turn. Then I'd get up and I'd have it all written down and be around a 10-minute or so fully worked out story of what the story I wanted to do was, and you pitched it to everybody, and the entire staff is there. Matt Groening, Al Jean, and also the most important person in that room would be James L. Brooks, who's our super executive producer. One of the greatest writers and directors of all time, and so he was the ultimate authority on what he liked and didn't like.
That's interesting. And is that an official title, super executive producer?
Super duper.
Never heard of that.
Super duper executive producer. As excited as I was to get a job on The Simpsons, it was super exciting, but also to be able to work with someone who I grew up with watching his shows. Like, he created the Mary Tyler Moore Show and
Yes.
Oh,
Taxi,
amazing.
and he directed Terms of Endearment and Broadcast News. And so to be able to be in the same room with someone who as a kid watching those shows, and if you ever watch those old shows, you'll hear Jim has a very particular kind of laugh, which is kind of like a high pitched kind of like, I'll just do it for you. It's kind of like, So if you ever watch old Mary Tyler Moore's or old Taxi episodes, you'll hear that. You'll hear, and that's Jim. That's Jim on the set, like laughing at it. So the first time I remember like being, I think, at a table read of a show I wrote, and he laughed that way. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like,
I'm hearing it
in
love that
person
shit.
now.
Wow. I eat
yeah.
up fun facts like that.
And we
That makes
watch
my
a
day.
lot of those old shows too. Like
We'll
all
catch
of
that.
Yeah.
That is so great.
Yeah, you'll hear it. You'll hear it because I always knew, even as a kid, I was like, that's got to be somebody who works on the show, because you hear the same laugh like week after week after week. So I figured that's got to be somebody who works on the show. And then I realized, I learned later that it
Oh,
was
I
Jim.
love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, let's move on to F is for Family. This show is so damn funny.
So good.
Our entire family binges this show.
Mm-hmm.
Season 5 was just released over a month ago. Are the rumors true? Is season 5 really going to be the final season?
Yeah, that's very true. We got a call from Netflix. We released season 4 in June of 2020, and we had plans for, like, this is what season 5 will be. This is probably where we could go after this, And we had a nice call with them where they were like, we really love the show. We think it's great. People are watching it, but Netflix has their ways, so they tend to not give too many shows that many seasons. So they told us then, they said, well, we think we'd like to tell you that we're deciding that this upcoming season 5 will be your final season. So that was a bit of a blow. And
a bummer, because we love it.
yeah, it was a bummer. And then on top of it, this was partly our fault or my fault, which was saying that, like, by season 4, every season more or less followed chronologically after the season right before it.
Yeah.
So season 4 ended story-wise right around the end of October of 1974. And so I knew that season 5 would be a chance for us to do stuff we hadn't done before. We had never seen a Thanksgiving episode. We had done a little bit of Christmas in the very first season, but we had never done like the Christmas season and all that stuff. So I said, let's make season 5 all about, among other things, building up to, Thanksgiving and a little bit of Halloween, and then Christmas season, and Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and possibly like New Year's. So when we pitched it, they thought that was great, but by the time things got around to picking us up, I think the pandemic didn't help too, because when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, suddenly, like, all bets were off. Like, will they continue to even make shows? Like, no one knew what was going on. So I think that ended up pushing our whatever decision to make more episodes back a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the time it came time for them to order it, to do it, they said they thought that we couldn't do 10 episodes and have them finished in time to come out by, Thanksgiving of 2021. So I said, no, we can do it. Don't worry about it. We'll cram it. We'll make it happen. Because we wanted to do those 10 episodes. But they said, well, let's just be easier if we do 8. So that's why the last season was 8.
Okay.
It was mostly because of that time of, like, trying to make this time window of coming out in time for the holiday season of 21 to fit with what the stories were about.
Well, that answers that question. And as a fan, I was obviously very upset until I saw the ending. It was so well done. I mean, full circle on the phone call at dinner, even the song choice on how it ended, Surrender, Cheap Trick. It was well done and so enjoyable.
Agree.
Yeah.
It wrapped it up nicely, where it kind of gave it closure, where if this is the end,
I feel good about it.
you feel good about it. It tied a bow.
Thank you. Well, it felt really good to me, too. I mean, that was an interesting season to plot out, and we knew that we needed to bring it around to an ending that was satisfying, but also we thought it was best just to sort of have, well, especially the main character Frank, to have not to sort of have like a complete kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge kind of conversion.
Yeah, yeah.
But like enough that enough that he makes like a baby step towards like a little bit of
That's all
emotional
that was
maturity
needed.
and a little
Though.
bit of,
For
yeah,
Frank, a baby
yeah.
step is a big step.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it was good to do that, and I'm so glad that you liked that song because I hit on that song as the song that would be the final song about 3 or 4 years ago, saying like I think that whenever we end the show, that should be the last song. And there's a bit of a personal thing for that too, which is that I remember a day like back in those like would it be around 1980 or so, because that song first became a big hit like in 1978, I think, when it was on the Cheap Trick Live at Budokan record. And that I have 3 brothers, and our family life was a little crazy. It wasn't as crazy as the Murphys, and my father didn't yell and scream like Frank Murphy, but it was every family has their own thing,
Of course.
and
sure.
so but we're all 4 of us brothers were hanging out together. My older brother had already gotten married, I think, and wasn't living in the house anymore. And I was there. I was home from college, and my other brothers were there. And we were just hanging out. And either that song came on the radio or we were playing it on the record or whatever. And that song started coming on, Surrender. And we all just kind of like started like singing it. It was a weird way. We were kind of like air guitaring it and singing it to each other. And it was almost like the unspoken thing, which was that's what I love about that song, which is like, your family can be really screwed up. Your mom is messed up. They're just weird, but just stick with it and surrender but don't give yourself away and you'll be okay. So I never forgot that moment. And so then all these years later, when I was working on the show, I hit on that as like that would be the perfect way to end.
That had to have been a tough call and a tough choice, but you definitely knocked it out of the park.
Choice.
And there is something about
you.
that song. I also felt some of the same sincerity and vibes you get while watching The Simpsons in this finale episode, especially with the box 16. That was really creative and kind of reminded me of some of the tender moments in The Simpsons, like when Homer found out his middle name.
Right.
I love that episode, and it kind of hits the same heartstrings that The Simpsons does.
Oh, that's huge, high praise. I mean, I'll say I think that's sort of what people ask sometimes, like what made The Simpsons work, and makes it work still, I think, which is that going back to the very beginning of it, it was this combination of these 3 really visionary people. Matt Groening, of course, created the characters based on his own family and the look of it, which was so unusual and strange, and his particular, kind of satirical point of view on things. And then you had Sam Simon, who was the original head writer and showrunner, who came from working on Taxi and Cheers and all those amazing, incredible shows, and had like great comedy writing instincts. And then Jim Brooks, who came from this world of like really going with emotional reality and truth, and that's the hallmark of his comedy, going all the way back to everything, Mary Tyler Moore and his movies. And so those 3 things kind of balance each other out. So when I got an F is for Family, as much as it was tried to make it a little bit different from Simpsons in terms of the storytelling, being that it was serialized and, people could curse and whatever, a little more realistic. But I think that DNA of The Simpsons is definitely in that show of try to be funny. We got our satirical weirdness in by the things that they watch on TV, like Colt Luger and all those crazy things. And, and that's where we got our like more zany stuff in, is through that. But ultimately, the heart of it and the emotional reality of the characters is what holds it all together.
It does. And how do you keep from mixing the 2 worlds when writing for both The Simpsons and F is for Family? Is it challenging to compartmentalize these 2 universes and all of their characters so that you can write effectively for both?
No, I wouldn't say it was that hard, honestly. I mean, the great thing was that The Simpsons, I can't thank The Simpsons enough. It's been I continue to be there. It's such a great job. It's such a great show, of course, and these amazing characters. But the people who I work with have been so wonderful to me. And so whenever we got another season of F is for Family ordered, they would let me essentially go away for a couple of months and just leave and go like take like kind of like a sabbatical, I guess you'd call it, where I'd go off and just be in charge of the writer's room for F is for Family for 5 months or so.
That
and then
is
come
awesome.
back. So I was able to sort of just put the Simpsons aside and come back. But I do think that there's enough of a difference between the characters and between the worlds that it wasn't that hard for me to do it. There'd be some times where we were working on things and someone would pitch something. I'd say, we kind of already did that. The Simpsons. So
Yeah.
it was good for me to have someone like me who knew both worlds.
Yeah,
So I
it's
could say,
kinda
like,
nice,
well, we really
actually.
shouldn't do that. Because we already did it. Simpsons did it as South Park used to say.
A writer
But,
on any show is going to go through that. Oh, Simpsons did that. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember that Simpsons
That will
episode. They
always
did the
be
same
a
thing.
challenge for any other show.
Is it easier or harder working on a serialized show and not having that clean slate to work with each episode?
Well, that's a really good question. It's both, I think. The fun that I wouldn't say easy or hard. It's just different. It was a different challenge because with the Simpsons, you are kind of creating a blank slate each time, but then that leaves a lot of sort of like you can do almost anything. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
But we're also coming from a place now where when I started, like that show that we mentioned, the Tony Hawk episode was the 300th episode, and now we're up to 750 plus. So
Crazy.
it's like how do you find? So the big challenge for writing The Simpsons now is finding stuff that hasn't been done yet, or finding a new take, or finding a fresh thing. But so with Officer Family, that was a different kind of blank slate because we just started with the real just the family characters, and then we kind of built. The fun part of that was the world building of it all, and okay, who are the people he works with, and what happens there, and what's the school like, and it was really great. And then it was really fun and interesting to be able to follow that through.
Yeah.
And to have it be serialized and have like a thing that happened in season 1, episode 2, be called back, 2 seasons later. And that was great. And it did help that I have a kind of a steel trap memory of some of those things. So I was able to sort of say, oh yeah, this happened back in episode 2 of season 3.
Love that.
One joke.
I have that ability as
Say
well.
that's definitely a
kind of
Blake thing to do as well.
the historian of the show to be able to
Yes.
say we've done that before. This was when. This is how we did it.
Episode 3, minute 4.
Let's talk about working with Bill. That had to be fun. Any funny Bill stories you can share?
Oh my God! Well, he's just the greatest. He's such what an amazing guy. He's so funny, of course. He's such a sweetheart. He's so generous and great. I would say the thing that really impressed me was that when we started together, because he'd already had a pretty good career going, in stand-up and acting as well, but he didn't have any experience with doing this kind of work, so he was really great in letting me be like the writer's room runner, the showrunner, and certainly for those first couple of seasons, he would sort of just say to me, like just treat me like I'm one of the guys on the staff, like sure I'm playing the main part, I'm going to have my input that way, but I'm not going to. He didn't be throw star weight around or anything like that, So he would
That's
pitch
awesome.
jokes, and he goes, if I pitch a terrible joke, then it doesn't get in. It's like, I'm not going to do that, and he didn't. So he was literally just in the room, and he for that first season, certainly for the first season and a lot for the second season, he basically put the rest of his career on hold just to be there in the writer's room every day. And he would walk in, sit in the writer's room, and just be one of the guys pitching jokes. And he barely ever would say, well, I want to do it like this, but he didn't. He was just one of the people. We had a great staff of writers who I'm huge admiration for, and we all got along great. But he just didn't. He didn't treat himself like he was anything more than just one of the writers.
Well, that is one hell of a cast. I mean, those are some monster names on that show. But that is awesome to hear about him. That's kind of exactly what you'd expect out of Bill, and that's cool to hear. He left his ego at the door.
That's why he's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did most of the subject matter come from stories or memories either you and Bill had from growing up? There's something so real about the subplots and storylines on that show.
Yeah, I'd say, it started with Bill. A lot of it came out of Bill's life. A lot of it came out of my life. And then once we started bringing in other writers, a lot of stuff came from there as well. People, the thing, I bet you the thing that if you had Bill on here right now, they'd say, what do you get asked the most? And it's probably they go, "Did you really hide under your parents' bed while they had sex?" Which is like one of the big things in the first season of the show. And the answer to that is no. Like that was just made up, and that came about as when we were working on the story for that. But a lot of things did come from. So like the one thing he'll say that I remember him pitching that did come from his life was being chased up a tree by the bullies, and that they were throwing firecrackers and stuff at him, or throwing rocks at him. I think they were throwing firecrackers at him.
Oh my God.
So that came from him. The stuff that came from me, like actual story things that came from me, again going back to the very first episode, was when Bill Murphy put a magnet on the color TV and ruined the color TV. That my brother did that to our color TV.
That was in one of the first episodes, wasn't it?
Number one.
That was the first episode.
yeah,
that was the
episode.
first episode.
Say that sounded familiar.
Yeah. So things like that, or like neighbors, like we have this super creepy neighbor Goomer. He's based on my semi creepy neighbor back when I grew up. So everything gets exaggerated for comedy effect.
Of
But
course.
this was a guy who would walk around the neighborhood. He'd walk his dog, and then he'd use that sort of as a pretext to sort of. You always see him like waving to you and peering in through the window and stuff like that. And then he did do this thing that I put in the show where he was a very strange man. This Mr. Well, I won't say his name.
Yeah.
He's not alive anymore, but he may have relatives still around. But anyway, that he had his old dog, and when the dog would poop, he would wipe the dog's butt with toilet paper.
Oh.
That is true. So things like that, little things that you don't forget when you're growing up, make it into a show. And the one thing that actually got in the show that we tried forever to get in, and I told Bill Burr this story at our first meeting, and he told me later, he's like, when you told me that story about your father, that's what made me realize that I think you're the guy to do this work on this idea with me, which is that my dad was not a yeller and screamer like Frank. He would sort of keep a even keel, but then he'd let his anger out in weird other ways. So the story is that we were watching television once, and a baseball game was on, and they had this commercial that used to run all the time back then for these cigars called White Owl cigars. And the conceit of the commercial was this guy sitting there with a cigar with a real smug look on his face, like a real smug look. And he goes, you may not smoke White Owl cigars now, but if you do, just try one. You'll see. We're gonna get you. That was the phrase. We're gonna get you. We're gonna get you. And my dad had a really frustrating day. He must have had something going on in his life where he was a blue collar guy who worked at a construction company. So maybe he had a bad day at work the day before. For whatever reason, he took it out on this guy on the TV. So the guy says, "We're gonna get you." And my dad literally talked back to the guy on TV, and he says, "You're not gonna get me, you son of a bitch." like he was really like taking it personal.
Y'all are like, what is happening right now?
I know. And my brothers and I, we were like around 11 or something, and we looked at each other like, wow, boy, Dad's got a lot going on. So anyway, I told Bill that story, and he thought that was really funny. And then we tried to work it into the show like every season. We couldn't get it in. We finally got it in season 4. And Frank is watching the bowling match, whatever, and that happens, and he says that. So that made me really, really happy. My brothers all watched that and like called me up right away and said, "Oh, you got the thing in."
That's some of the funniest stuff too.
Love background stories like that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about visual direction and writing for animation. This is really interesting to me, and I know it's a big part of writing these shows. How frequently does it have to be used? For every line, do you write first and focus on the content and add the visual direction after, or more as you go?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like, well, the first thing we do is really work on the story and what's the story about, what are the beats of the story, and then we come up with the dialogue and the jokes, and then especially, well, I've worked on some other shows that are a little more visually oriented. Like I worked on some more kid cartoons, like at Nickelodeon and on Disney, and even on those kinds of shows, it's the kind of thing too where the writer doesn't have much input after you write it to the animation people. So you tend to like want to really call out shots and things like that and say like angle on this or close up on this or that kind of thing. So on a show like Simpsons or F is for Family, there's a little bit less of that. and especially not for family, because then I was really working very closely with the animation people. So I would have a big meeting at the beginning of each episode and talking them through it and say like, well, I think this is the kind of scene where we want to be really close up on Frank here until we see this. So it didn't have to go in the script as much as, but definitely was a thing that was a lot of input from all of us, and specifically me, like working with the animation people on each episode and calling out some kind of shots. Or I might say like, this scene would be really great if it was kind of framed like this scene from this movie, or, that kind of thing.
No, that totally makes sense. That's fascinating to me. What do you enjoy watching yourself? Do you have any shows you follow? Have you seen any good movies recently?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for TV, I tend to watch anything in like the Star Wars type stuff, so I'm watching Boba Fett right now. Mandalorian I loved. Boba Fett so far is interesting. It's only had 2 episodes, but it's been the same general world as the Mandalorian. I watch all the Marvel things, although I was never a big comic book kid growing up, but I enjoy all the Marvel shows.
For sure.
When it comes to comedy, I tend to like shows that are really just funny. Like, I'm not a big fan of like shows that are kind of like half and half.
Yeah.
Like I know everyone loves Ted Lasso, and I have not given that show its proper.
Me neither.
Proper due.
I keep getting recommended Ted Lasso, and I have yet to give that the proper
so,
attention.
Maybe I'll give it a shot. But I tend to go towards more like just hard comedy. Like my favorite show, it ended its most recent season this fall, I believe, is What We Do in the Shadows.
Great show.
So funny, and I'm a huge fan of Matt Berry from that show. So his show, his English show called Toast of London, if you've seen it.
I have not.
Is one of the, oh my God, it's so crazy. It's super absurd.
Ooh, need it.
It's called Toast of London, and then the 3rd or 4th season of it is getting ready to come out. It's running in England right now. It's called Toast of Tinseltown, where he comes over to Hollywood. But in it, he's an actor, like a weird kind of super pompous actor, and it almost defies description. You'd say it's the kind of show where it's like, oh, he's this actor and he's struggling in his life and he has weird jobs, and but that's only half of it. It's very weird and very bizarre and kind of surrealistic, and it's super funny. So if you get a chance to see it, it was on Netflix, I believe, but it might not be on Netflix anymore. If you can find it anywhere, especially if you like What We Do in the Shadows and you like what he does on that show.
Yeah, I love the movie and the show of What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, you've got to see it. So that's my highly recommend.
Ooh, good
nice
recommendation.
I just saw something a couple of weeks ago that was very New Jersey. I wonder if you saw it. It was a documentary called Class Action Park.
Yeah, I went to that park.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would say that, because it was very New Jersey, all about Action Park. That was new to me. That was fascinating. That blew my mind. Just the whole concept, the fact that ever existed, how long it stayed open.
Yeah.
So you went to Action Park. You have some memories there yourself.
I did. I was my whole family. We went there. This is going back to like around 1979 or 1980. For some reason, we were going to have a vacation, like a proper vacation where we were going to go. They say like go down the shore, which means that in Jersey means like renting a house down at the beach, the Jersey Shore. And for whatever reason, it fell through. I can't remember. And instead of going away for a week down to Atlantic City or Wildwood or whatever, we said, well, we'll just take day trips. So that was our one day trip, was to go to Action Park. And it was like an hour or so ride from our house. It was a super hot day, as I recall. And yeah, that place was tons of commercials for it. And it was these water slides that were incredibly fast and dangerous water slides. And the one thing that I remember the most, because I got somewhat banged up on it, was this thing called the Alpine Slide, which was
the Alpine Slide. That's where all
like
the injuries happened.
Without water. Right, yeah. So it was basically like a water slide without water. And you sat on this like plasticky kind of like cart that had, I think it had wheels. I can't remember.
Oh my God.
But it had like a stick that you could use that was kind of like a brake stick. Literally you went up to the top of this hill and rode this thing down, and you're riding it down. It's going fast. You're banking on these turns. And like on one of the last turns, I flew off the thing. I tumbled down. I got my legs all scratched up, like completely all screwed up. So, but that was what it was. But that's the kind of thing like we would do on Episode Family. Like that's the kind of thing where you couldn't imagine it happening now in today's world. But back then it was like, yeah, you didn't wear seatbelts in the car, and like, and kids ran off and played in the woods, and you didn't have seatbelts, and babies didn't have baby seats. And it's like, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
Some of those rides were mind blowing. I couldn't believe that. Like they actually had a water slide that had a loop at the bottom, and they tried to make that work. It was like they literally said like it was ideas the owners would have like while drinking. They draw down on a bar napkin and then hand it to like some teenage engineers and say, make it happen.
Yeah, that's it. There was one I recall that was literally that I didn't go on, I don't think, but my brother did. Was literally just a straight kind of a drop, like at like a 60-degree angle, just like straight down with like you're going like super fast, and like it was up to you to like keep yourself safe.
That was the one they said
to
you didn't even make contact with the slide until halfway down, and I believe that was the one that was notorious for shooting liquid in places you didn't want liquid to go, whether you were a guy or a girl.
What?
Right, yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Oh my God, where you're like not even touching anything until you get down.
That had to be fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Unregulated water park in the 80s. That had to be fun. God, that had to be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last question. Let's say I'm a comedy writer and I believe I got the goods. What is it I can do today in working towards becoming the next Michael Price?
The thing to do is just to keep working on it, like to write as much stuff as you can, or find an outlet for your comedy. Like for me, it was what got me started was doing this improv and sketch performing, where because I always thought it was kind of funny, but it wasn't until I was doing this, taking these classes, and then being in this performing group where we had to come up with material every week, different material, or perform in front of an audience, where I could get enough reinforcement to realize like, oh, okay, I thought this was a funny idea for a sketch, and I guess it is now because people are laughing at it, and finding ways to sort of hone it and learn what makes a joke work, what doesn't make a joke work. So any way that you can do that, or even if you're just writing on your own, write something that you really like, share it with your people who you trust, and get feedback, and just keep doing it until you feel like you're really, really good at it. And then ultimately, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to find some way to get it to somebody who can help you, like an agent or something like that. And that's probably the hardest part, is to get the in that way. And it may just be, it used to be a thing where, again, this is in a pre-pandemic time, where I would say, come to LA, get a job somehow, doing anything to make money, keep writing, maybe take a class at an improv place or something like that, or something like that. And then if you can get a job, like getting coffee on a show or something, get it any way you can. Like find anybody who knows somebody who can get you just a job, even on the entry level of a show, and work your way up that way and start meeting people and making connections until you find somebody who's ultimately ready to look at your stuff and hopefully pass it on to the next person.
That is great advice. That's exactly how I would imagine it goes.
Yeah.
Like that's really good advice.
It does sound like
you got to just put yourself
the
out
best
there.
job ever.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say is, like, for me, the one thing that really helped me was that I had no plan B. Like, I came out to LA with my writing partner, and it was like, I'm either gonna find some way to work in the entertainment business, or I don't know what's going to happen. Like,
I don't know what
like it wasn't like, well, I'll give it a shot for a summer, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back to law school, or I'll just go be a doctor. Like, I had nothing else.
I don't think it ever works for those people that are like, I'm going to try it for a summer. If it doesn't work, I'll fall back.
No, because
I'll go home.
to this.
All in.
You're born this way.
Yeah.
Good advice. You have been such a pleasure to have on.
Oh my God,
Mr.
so
Price.
much fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cannot thank you enough for joining us. I really do hope we get the opportunity to speak again sometime.
I hope so too. This was great. Thank you so much.
No,
Such a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for us. And F is for Family. It's season 5 on Netflix right now. Just came out November 27th. A must-see. And of course, The Simpsons remains the best show of all time. And you can follow the very funny Michael Price at Mike Price in LA on Twitter. That's at Mike Price, the letters in LA on Twitter. Thank you again so much for joining us, Mr. Price. Really do appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
you.
Take care. Well, that was awesome. How cool
So
was he?
cool.
Oh my god, I could have talked to him for like 3 more hours.
I
It
know.
was so fun.
I was in story time, just listening.
That
I
was,
was-
awesome.
Really soaking up all that Simpson-y goodness. That was just a real fucking treat. God, that was cool. The best part about interviewing Mr. Price was not having to even think about watching my mouth. He's from New Jersey. He works with Bill Burr. If you asked him, he'd probably say we were vanilla at best.
Yeah.
But that Vanilla Bean podcast I did, like, what?
You guys like that? Cool.
Phone down. Good stuff. Well, this should blow your fucking top off. There's a new dream car giveaway over at 8080. In addition to the 15% off you get for using code CRUNCHY, they're offering double the entries. So right now, every dollar is worth not 1, but 2 entries into this action. You do not want to miss out. Nor do you want to forget to check out somethingcrunchy.com, where you'll find every episode, our links for social media, and the Almighty Crunch store, where you'll find all kinds of crunchy gear showing that you are a proud citizen of Crunch Nation. Then there's the Something Crunchy Facebook group. Big growth this week and over the holidays. We gained more than weight this year. 2022 is off to an extremely crunchy start, and feel free to join us in there for some hot memes and good vibes. Door is always open. This has been another episode of Something Crunchy, and as always, don't ever forget to live your crunchiest life.
And be crunchy to one another.
Please don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, and all that crunchy good shit. Thank you for listening.
Bum, ba-da-bum, bum, 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 bum.